Oh, motherfucker. That bastard took all my stuff. Everyone refresh. I don't know what happened, but we're back from outer space. Are we live? Looks like it. Hopefully. Looks like we are, right? Nope. Looks like there's 6 people watching. We are live. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. I just died while we were offline. Hopefully that doesn't happen again. It was rather annoying.
Whole other thing that should be studied.
Well, in fairness, Bill Morneau, Mark Garneau, David Lametti, but they have also gone out the door and then had difficult things to say. Like there is something about the breakdown in the relationship between the First Minister and his ministers that transcends both genders. But yes, it has been, the women have been the real high-profile one. Greg, last 30 seconds. If Trudeau does go, who's the best person to replace
him? That was
weird. Let's hear it, Greg.
Tough question.
Okay, you're putting me on the spot, so I'm just going to say.
Present company excluded, of course.
Really honest. Okay, so Sean Fraser is out of the mix. That would have been my absolute first choice. I would love to see a female leader, but right now there's a guy, and I was quoted in the Hill Times last year about this, and my line about Dominic LeBlanc was, the minister is the message. And Dominic gets stuff done, and he gives me confidence.
Gotcha. Okay. We'll leave it there. We're going to have a lot more to talk about on this. But up next, we're going to talk about the Conservatives. They had a much better 2024. But what's in store for the official opposition in 2025? Stay right there.
Found a podcast that summarizes the Accuses Zero over 3 episodes for trolling. Jesus. Well, if you've got the time, might as well.
Welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. We're looking at what's in store for Canadian politics in 2025. We just took a look at the Liberals' fortunes. Now onto the Conservatives. The official opposition riding high in the polls for well over a year now. Can they sustain this lead until the next election?
The next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Wait, where'd all my... Oh,
Life wasn't like this before Justin Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone.
Did all that wool
and let me say
despawn?
how incredibly proud and even a little bit shocked I was that in the Liberal fortress of St. Paul's, the people voted for our common sense plan.
They can't just throw him out. He can't just run away. They need to face the music. Why won't we have a carbon tax election now?
Oh.
Justin Trudeau is a big talker and a little doer. Crime, chaos, drugs, and disorder are common in our streets, and he divides to distract from all that he has broken.
Everything on which the Prime Minister spends gets worse.
Now is the time for a carbon tax election to turn the decision away from me or Mr. Trudeau or Mr. Singh or Mr. Carney and put it in the hands of the people.
Okay, back with me are our political insiders, Melanie Richer, Greg McEachern, and Fred Delory. They always take a shot at Mark Carney, even though we know he's not coming into cabinet. Look, I almost have whiplash going from the 2024 the Liberals to the 2024 the Conservatives. I mean, what do they need to do to keep this going in 2025?
Nothing. They could just sit back.
Take the day off?
They could. I know Pierre, and he's going to campaign incredibly aggressively. He doesn't need to. The Liberals are shooting themselves in the foot, just to go back to them on that. But at the end of the day, Poilievre has done a fantastic job as an opposition member and opposition leader we are going into an election year, and I think he will have to show a bit more government in waiting. I think we're going to see more meat on the bones when it comes to some policies. You know, for the last year or two, people have been asking, like, where's the platform? Why isn't he putting it out? The world keeps changing on us. You can't just put out a platform 6 months ago or a year ago, because now we have Trump and we have tariffs and we have a major trade war coming in front of us. And I think Conservatives need to put their attention to that. Affordability is obviously the #1 issue, and that's why carbon tax election resonates. But it's going to be one of those things where I don't know what this tariff thing is going to do to us. I don't know what it's going to do to our economy. Maybe it will reinforce his message, or he may have to adapt and change it. The thing is, knowing Poilievre and everything that we've seen over the last number of years, he's going to be able to rise and meet that moment and adjust his message, and I believe that's going to work very well for them.
You know, Mel, going back to our conversation about the Liberals, where, you know, the industry and the energy that Justin Trudeau displayed on the campaign trail, he's always outmatched his opponents. He's not going to do that with Pierre Poilievre. He is the hungriest politician, or one of the hungriest I've ever seen in my life in terms of his energy and desire for that job.
Absolutely. I was talking to former MP Nathan Cullen, you know, I want to say a few months ago, and that's what he was saying. He said, have you ever seen somebody who wants it that bad? And when you want the top job, you need to want it with almost everything that you have. So for sure, the energy that we're going to see from Pierre Poilievre, I think that that's fair. I agree with Fred. You're going to eventually have to switch. You're going to have to show people that you can be statesmanlike, that you can be government, that you can make decisions that will benefit people and not just, you know, tear everything down. I'm not as confident that they're going to be able to do that successfully. I guess we'll wait and see. I also don't know that in the face of everything that we're up against with Trump and potential tariffs coming for the U.S., I don't know that the carbon tax election is going to be as persuasive to folks in the new year. I think, you know, just doing a check with folks in my universe who used to bring that up, it seems to have gone away a little bit. So I don't know if they'll need to pivot that messaging. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know that it'll work as well in the new year leading up to the next election, particularly when, you know, we are faced against that. So it'll be interesting to see how they shift, how they start putting forward plans, and what that looks like. How are you going to make my life more affordable other than just, you know, we're not going to do what this guy did, I think will be key for them if they want to continue to be in the position that they're in.
Yeah, Greg, you know, the issue set presented by Trump may very well force them to shift, but I think the benefit for them of having been on things like X attacks and that is they were speaking to the issues of people at the time, and they will have that baked in as you're focused on the same things I'm focused on, even if you do shift to a more urgent thing in the moment, right?
Yeah, and Mel raises a really good point. You know, there is some question about whether or not people were really angry about the carbon tax, or it was a placeholder just for anger. And the government could never seem to figure that out. I think
the orange stuff I can make so much.
Freeland's departure happened. Poilievre did not meet the message moment by talking about carbon tax Carney, because that didn't age very well for a week. You know, Dominic LeBlanc revealed that Mark Carney was no longer in discussions. Right. And that day he was still focused on carbon tax Carney, and I remember being with a group of people like this and everyone going, no, you know, the message you should be is around the finance minister and deputy prime minister just left. Why are you talking about Mark Carney? But it is the script, and we're told that he stays up very late and he works on the script. So his ability to pivot, I think would be something, if I was working against him, something that I would watch. The other thing I would notice is the conversation that we had when he had his little detour, when he was between New Brunswick and Nova Scotia at the border, and he was with some people that had some nasty flags. He looked a bit disheveled. And I remember, like, the comment at the time, I think on our panel, was he can't help himself with this. And again, that was a judgment moment. You could almost see in the video that the
have a good night, man.
dropped, like, maybe I shouldn't have stopped here.
3.5 hour game according to Google.
That we want from our leaders at times
that's a long ass game.
And part of that is going to be empathy. There is going to be a disaster. There's going to be something bad that happens. And just the childish rhetoric, noun the verb, doesn't cut it. Occasionally, when I worked for the Paul Martin government, I get brought into PMO when Media Advance, Torrent Advance were shorthanded. And sadly, I worked on one of the first, when a soldier was repatriated, whose soldier had been killed in Afghanistan. And I was with Prime Minister Martin, and the widow was there, and she had an infant. And it was off camera, you couldn't see, there was, the limo there. And I watched Paul Martin turn into a human being and forget about everything else and try to help this widow with an infant get in the car. That made me very happy that I was working for that man in the moment. That's what keeps your people around. I hope that whoever our next prime minister is able to meet that moment as well.
Right. It's verb the noun, not noun the verb.
Sorry.
As you said, it's axe the tax, not tax the axe.
Sorry.
He's had enough taxes on axes.
Liberals at
Yeah, exactly.
I will return the English decree. Sorry.
But that is the construct, right? But you know, Fred, what do you make of that? Like, he is rigidly and effectively disciplined. It has worked. There is a commanding lead.
You have so many chickens.
Of that, in part because of the mood in the country and people being done with Prime Minister Trudeau after 10 years. These vulnerabilities people point to haven't hurt him so far. What do you see in your head?
I think being disciplined and focused and strong on messaging is a strength, not a weakness. It is so hard to cut through in politics. It's so hard to cut through when people are so distracted. There's so many things in front of us, so many different tools and social media and everything. And he punches through in all of his different platforms and different messages that he uses. The empathetic side, I've seen Polyev at local riding events and stuff over the years. He's very empathetic with people. You know, we're going to see that, I think, at different times. We're seeing him in the House of Commons and then doing town halls. But he is someone who does speak to the issues. And I think this is one of his strengths is seeing what's coming. And that's why inflation, he was predicting it long before it spiked. And that's why he was so far ahead of it. And his messaging was strong on it. He knew it was coming and he was talking about it before it was a big deal.
But you know, just a point on this, like, you know, unless something dramatic changes, there'll be an election and he'll be the prime minister, right? Something dramatic has to change there. We saw that in Britain with Keir Starmer and the Labour Party, and they cruised to this massive majority. And within 6 months, it's like, whoomp, the popularity and the support went down because so many of the issues are completely intractable, you know, or just hard to fix. He's going to have to manage expectations on the other side of it should he win and put a cabinet out there that has more latitude than the caucus has.
You
right
son of a bitch! How did you get in here?
At what happened in the UK, you know, the UK Labour Party wasn't promising that much different than the UK Conservatives, or at least
people just wanted change. They want change, and the issues they want.
The Conservatives here do seem to have a much more robust plan or ideas and stuff they want to focus on that I think will be very different. Same time in Labour, their numbers didn't actually go up much. The Conservatives just bottomed out there. Here in Canada, like, Conservatives are at historic highs as well as Liberals are at lows. Like, there is a rise there with Polyev.
Yeah, and depending on what happens with the Prime Minister, we'll see if that gap is real, artificial, a little bit inflated. But you know, but it is a persistent
leader comes in, and that's why the Carney thing. The assumption is if Trudeau goes, Carney will be the opponent. So Polyev is preparing for that possibility, and it's important to push that message out. And I think it continues to work for him. Okay, we're going to leave it there for now because we've looked into our crystal balls for the Liberals and the Conservatives. What's in store for the New Democrats in 2025? Stick around and find out. That's next. And welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today we're looking at what's in the magic 8 ball for Canadian politics in the year ahead. We've gone over the Liberals and the Conservatives. Now, what's in store for the NDP in 2025? Their supply and confidence agreement with the Liberals helped achieve a number of NDP priorities such as dental care and pharmacare, but that deal is long over.
We are very serious that pharmacare has to be delivered. Single payer, universal public. We have given the Prime Minister a deadline, a very firm deadline. If they break the agreement, they walk away from the agreement, there is nothing that they can expect from us then. And so I've ripped up the supply and confidence agreement. This now means that an election timing has become more uncertain. Justin Trudeau and the Liberals are too weak and too beholden to corporate interests. Middle-class families need a break. And the Liberals informed us that they had caved to our demands.
He claimed he had torn up the carbon tax coalition onto which he had signed up, that he was going to stop fighting for his pension and start fighting for the people. But once the votes were counted, he betrayed them again.
We're not going to let Pierre Poilievre tell us what to do. I'm calling on Justin Trudeau to resign. He has to go.
What build the staff?
Okay, back with me are our political insiders, Fred Delory, Greg McEachern, and Melanie Richer. Mel, this is the year all options are on the table for Jagmeet Singh. What do you think is going to happen with the NDP in 2025?
Well, all options are on the table, David, so we'll wait and see. I think there's a massive opportunity for Jagmeet and for the NDP this year. I think what they've been trying to do since they walked away from I'm not going to say ripped up, but since they walked away from the supply and confidence agreement earlier this year, is they've seen a shoring of their numbers in that orange-red vote. I think they need a little bit more time to shore back up that orange-blue vote because, of course, a lot of their MPs that they currently have are in orange-blue seats, not orange-red seats. And with everything that's happening with the Liberals, I think it's now more than ever a really good opportunity to do that, to leapfrog the Liberals. We've started to see that a little bit more consistently in the polls, that the NDP is able to do that. And we've seen it on issues that we know matter to the NDP and to people, so affordability, housing, and healthcare, where they're a little bit closer to the Conservatives than the Liberals are. So I think there's a massive opportunity for Jagmeet and the NDP in early 2025 to really tell Canadians that if they're looking for change, and if they don't believe that Pierre Poilievre is that change that they want in their lives, that Jagmeet and the NDP can be that change. They just need to step up and step into it. So that's my hope for 2025, but also I think the opportunity for them.
Greg, they haven't seemed to have been able to step up and step into it to this point, right? Like the polls, they may have shored up the Liberal red side of the orange-red side of things, but they're kind of still stuck there. High teens, not quite breaking into the 20s.
Yeah, and the clip that was played, the language, beholden to corporate interests, that really sounds like rhetoric on the left from the 1980s. It does not sound like what people say around the kitchen table. I don't hear beholden very often in conversation.
Oh, all the time.
All the time. And I'm not quite sure what corporate interests mean. Yeah. And Mel is an excellent communicator, so I know you probably don't want to, for me to emphasize this, but the thing is, Jagmeet is a really nice guy. He's a very engaging. He's great to talk to. There's something that does not translate from the guy you run into in the street to the guy we see in front of the mic. And I don't know what the issue is. We've talked a lot about the NDP's inability to celebrate the wins that they got.
So many cocoa beans.
I don't think years from now, we've run deficits, significant deficits. We went through a worldwide pandemic. I think years from now, I'm not sure people are going to talk about how much dental care costs. I think people are going to see it's going to take a while to kind of get through the system, but people's overall health is going to improve because of that program. And people will say good things about it. But the NDP, we're not able to kind of capture that now. And I still, for the life of me, can't understand why one of the nicest, most interesting guys in politics does not translate when he gets behind a mic.
So Fred, what do you think that is? Because often when he gets behind the mic, it's a repetition of the same sort of thing he said the last time he was at the mic, right? About whether it's beholden to corporate interests, he laments all the reasons why this government is failing Canadians, and then he votes with them. Yeah. And so it doesn't compute, I think, with people. Is that the issue, or is there something else there?
Yeah, well, look, he sounds like someone I'd love to have a beer with. He'd be like one of my neighbors. I don't want any of my neighbors running the country, though. That's a whole different...
They said the same thing about you.
I don't want to run the country either. I tried, it didn't work. But look, no, his communication style, Poilievre has eaten his lunch on that worker vote, and a big part of it is because Poilievre is talking to them, where Singh talks about, corporate CEO bosses all the time. He talks about how, he attacked Poilievre and said he's not going to be on the picket line with you. Vast majority of workers do not ever want to be on a picket line. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't, Poilievre's talking about we're going to make life more affordable, and you're talking about picket lines. It just doesn't compute. I think, as Melanie points out, this is a huge opportunity for them. They will not make it. The fact they haven't grown their numbers at all, they're tied with the Liberals, who are at historic lows. The progressive vote, if you add the progressive vote up, it's the same as the conservative vote, very similar. It's split in two, the Liberals and the NDP. They need to eat that Liberal vote. They need to go after it. Singh has not proven to be capable at all. of doing that. And at the same time, because Trudeau's flailing, he's not going to be able to go at it. So that vote's just going to split in this election, which is going to lead to, I think, an historic route for the Conservatives.
So Mel, how do they do that? How do they sort of become that champion of progressive anti-Poilievre votes? Because let's face it, that's what it's going to come down to.
So much,
you know, is it the leader? Is it his messaging? Is it the issues he campaigns on? Is it his style? What do you think needs to change there?
So maybe I'll go back to the worker, the Pierre Poilievre eating Jagmeet's lunch. I don't believe that to be true. I think we can just point to Elmwood Transcona and see that Pierre Poilievre's message didn't work with workers in that riding, and that Jagmeet was able to keep that seat. What I think needs to happen is
Why
is to
Bamboo
talk to
let me
people
make
the way that they
scaffolding? Why
need to
can't I
talk
make
to.
the
And to your
scaffolding?
point, I think that if we were to have a Prime Minister Jagmeet Singh, I think a lot of people's lives would be better. So I hope that that's something that they're able to achieve. But as it relates to the corporate welfare stuff, I agree with you. It doesn't necessarily resonate with me either, and I think that that's a big challenge of talking to people and responding to how they're feeling, to the anger that they're feeling, and channeling it into something that you're going to do to make their lives better. I think to do that hope thing, to the pivot to hope thing, I don't think there's anybody better than Jagmeet to do that currently, right now, elected in politics. So I hope they get there, but I agree that the path to pivoting to the path to pivoting to here's how we're going to make your life better. Here's how we understand what you're going through and what we're going to do to improve things. The mechanics of that, how can you support the government, but he needs that part, the middle part, I think is where the work needs to happen so that folks really hear him as an option.
On that though, we talked about Trudeau's energy in campaigns. We talked about the hunger Poilievre demonstrates. Do we see enough of that from Jagmeet Singh right now? Like, it could be an election at any time, and certainly since the supply and confidence agreement ripped up, are we seeing that industry and energy from the leader of the fourth party who's trying to replace the Liberals as that progressive alternative?
Right. Well, I was on the bus with him in the last election, and I did see that. I will say he is a young dad, or has 2 young kids at home, and that's really challenging.
I hear you.
I think Danny just turned 1 maybe a few weeks ago, and Anhud, I think, is turning 3 in January. So that's definitely challenging of being the kind of dad that you want to be, and I know that that's something that's super important to Jagmeet. And it's really lovely to see, but to your point, you do need to have some of that hunger. And
what
where
the
I
fuck
see
are you
that
doing
in
up here?
Jagmeet is the fighter, the taking care of people. We don't talk about his story often, but Jagmeet helped raise his brother. That his father was an alcoholic, and they needed to remove the brother from the home. And Jagmeet, I think, worked 3 jobs to take care of his brother. When he's in that mode, when he's in the mode of, cards are down, people's lives are hard. I've got your back, and I'm going to help you make ends meet. That's, I think, the best Jagmeet. So if we can get that Jagmeet in January and February, I think we're going to see that energy on the campaign from Jagmeet too.
Yeah, it feels like a make or break year for him, right? Third national campaign. It's breakthrough or probably be replaced. Okay, up next, our political insiders break down the big issues they're going to be watching for next year. Stay right there. We'll be right back with
That's a good idea to build these walls out of bamboo. Oh, I didn't get the glass. That's what I was going down for.
Welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today we've been going over what to expect in the year ahead for the Liberals, the Conservatives, and the NDP. But now we're going to open the floor to our political insiders for their picks. Greg McEachern, Melanie Richer, and Fred Deloria are here. All right, so Greg, what is your big issue to watch in 2025 other than what we've talked about with the parties?
There's a device in American politics called the first 100 days. It goes back to FDR. He won in 33. And he used the phrase about his first 100 days. He had 15 pieces of legislation, depression at the time, and that device is used to judge a lot of judge American presidencies. Clinton, for example, had Nannygate. He went through 2 attorney general appointments. That seems kind of quaint now, considering what Trump has gone through with some of his. He's burning through a lot of media and goodwill, but it's a very, very different time. So I'd be watching how he's going to behave those first 100 days because it often tells you what their presidency is going to be like.
Yeah, well, look, if it's anything like what he's done in the run-up to actually going back to the White House, it's going to be busy. Fred, what's your issue to watch in 2025?
Well, I think provincial elections, particularly Ontario, we're seeing, Nova Scotia just went, and everyone's saying incumbents should be struggling now. They broke the record for most seats. The Conservatives did as an incumbent. In Ontario, it looks like they're gearing up. They need a narrative. They need to say why they're going, because they're going a bit early. But if they, their government is only 3 years younger than Trudeau's, and they're still on the upswing and still able to grow. And I think that says a lot about what Doug Ford's doing. We're seeing him on the international stage now, leading Team Canada, apparently, because there's no federal leadership on that.
He's a bit like Tim Houston, a small set of issues that he's hyper-focused on, right? And keeps driving that home. Has a narrative. You keep
idea.
That and the Fez, your two big preoccupations. Mel, what's your big thing to watch right now?
Yeah, obviously, based on everything that we've said so far tonight, it's watching for when the federal election comes. If it comes in the winter, I can't imagine with everything that's happened with Minister Freeland, it doesn't come sooner rather than later. So watching for that and what it means for all the parties.
When do you think it will be? I mean, there's this, Parliament comes back January 27th, in theory. We could see confidence votes February, March, the NDP signaling now that all options are on the table. Do you think we look at like a vote in May, April, June, that type of period?
I think it's sooner than that. I can't imagine we make it that far outside of there being a provincial election and not wanting to go at the same time or wanting to make sure that folks in Ontario aren't voting twice so close to each other. I would, if I was a betting person,
right.
I would, and I don't have any inside knowledge track like the supply confidence agreement conversation that we had last June.
Yeah.
I don't know anything. I
You're
don't
not
know when
holding
the
back on
NDP's
us.
planning
Okay.
for this. I just want to set the record straight.
Right.
I can't see how the government survives to being able to table the budget based off of how things are going in the last few weeks.
It's interesting, just because the federal election, we know it's going to happen in 2025 unless there's some dramatic change that pushes it off to 2026. Canada's supposed to host the G7 this summer, right? Something Prime Minister Trudeau is looking forward to. If we end up in a Liberal leadership situation, Fred, who do you think emerges from that? Who do you think enters into it? Who? I know they keep talking about Kearney. Is that who the Conservatives are the most worried about, or is there someone else out there who's an issue for them?
I think the thought is just that he would win it. I think that's what they're preparing for. It's it's interesting. Liberals have not had a real leadership race in a decade, and things have changed drastically in politics and the way we communicate in the decade. The Conservative Party has gone through 3 federal leadership races in 4 years, in 5 years, and I can tell you each one of those changed drastically from the last because of the way we communicate has changed. I don't think the Liberals are quite prepared for what they're going to be getting themselves into. It is going to be bloody, it's going to be divisive, there's going to be wedge issues that are going to be pulled and prodded. It's not, the Liberal Party traditionally, we always believed was the party that's just about winning elections. It's not actually grounded in any type of ideology. I think that's going to shift. Because if you want to sign up numbers,
it has shifted.
But I mean, for a leadership race, if you want to win a leadership race, you've got to find those groups of people to sign up. How do you get them to sign up? You got to fire them up on issues, and you got to point out that your opponents are against these issues, and it's going to be a bloodbath.
There's a sliding doors moment. Was it 2017 Andrew Scheer won?
Yes.
Yeah. Maxime Bernier led on every ballot until that. Very different party should Max Bernier have won that race. Mel, we look at the possibility, and look, as we're having this conversation, we don't know what Justin Trudeau is going to do. But his caucus increasingly and some of his cabinet increasingly want him to go. I mean, who do you think does step in there if it does open up to a standard sort of leadership race?
I genuinely don't know. You mentioned Minister LeBlanc. I think some of the problems that the Liberals currently have is, one, they're not connecting with people. I don't know that Kearney can do that. So I think, honestly, Kearney would be a gift to a party like the NDP. Minister LeBlanc, though, would fill he's a little bit more colloquial. I think he's a little bit more able to talk to people the way that people talk. But I think the other thing about both LeBlanc and Kearney is the statesmanship, it's the steady hand is the other problem that the Liberals are having. I think those are the two problems, the disconnected from the reality of people, which I don't think Kearney helps, and the stable hand. I think both of those could be contenders for that. But again, like you point to the issues base, I don't know that either of those people fire people up, right?
Yeah,
so that's the question. Totally. But the flip side of that is if you look to what happened in Ontario, I don't know that Bonnie Crombie fired a lot of people up either, and she won. So it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out in this context of it seems like the table is set. So what do you do? Do you point to the rebuild for a few years from now. So yeah, a lot of questions and hard to see how that would go or what direction it would go in.
If they get that pro-business central banker in Kearney, the beholden to corporate interest line might actually work this time. You know?
Like robot, right? Like unable to really talk to people in the way that.
Well, it's hard to know, right? Like until you see it, right? And we've never seen it. He's just been talked about more than anybody's ever put their name on a ballot. Anyone who's ever gone into cabinet. Anyone who's ever sort of like been truly active politically, aside from a couple of cameos at conventions. So you just don't know. But like, you know, Greg, you mentioned LeBlanc earlier. There is a coalescing of thought in a lot of liberal circles that he has the temperament and the political skills and the communication skills to handle Poilievre as better than any of the other names you hear, such as Melanie Joly, Anita Anand,
I think maybe that tree is blocking the light from
I don't know if that's where it ended up going. I don't know if he wants it. But I mean, who do you think would be the contenders should the Prime Minister decide he's going to step away?
The people that are rumored to have won it, and there was a lot of speculation about this last year at the Liberal biennial, Anita Anand, Minister Champagne, Melanie Joly. You know, I know a lot of people wanted Sean Fraser to run. Dominic's name emerged well before this week, as when people started to get concerned about the future. I've heard some other names. I don't know if they're wishful thinking. Obviously, the perennial Mark Carney element of this, but there's a line from Rose Kennedy when she was talking about her son. Teddy Kennedy ran for Senate really young, and she was talking about his ambition, and she said he would have gone into the priesthood, but he wanted to start off by being bishop. And I will tell you, in politics, I've seen this in municipal politics in this city, when people come into politics and they start at a very high level, and you are sworn in as a cabinet minister, you get the car and driver, you get the department, and you don't understand how it's not just partisan politics, it's how partisan politics work in your party. Because our three parties operate very, very differently. And those people are always the ones who get the clothesline. They don't see it coming. And I do like, you know, I've always wanted to write an op-ed called In Praise of Partisans, because, you know, we know our business. You might have been very successful in corporate Canada or somewhere else as a writer, an actor, but it doesn't necessarily instantly translate to success in politics.
I go back, we've talked about it throughout the segments, about the hunger. Because I'd watched this in provincial politics back home, Fred, is that, you know, this is the next premier. And the timing isn't right, not going to do it. And they always found a reason not to go. You look at Pierre Poilievre, if you really want to do it, you go when the door is open. And if you don't, someone else is going to go through it when you are ready, right?
Well, that's it. I mean, right now, if you're also competing for the prime ministership, not just leader of a potential fourth party if you wait till after the next election. So you got to go now. The hunger thing is interesting. You mentioned in the last number of leadership races I've been in, there's one correlation I found. Everyone who won of the three federal leadership race and the Ontario leadership race was the candidate who called the most people. Simple statistics. Someone who will work those phones and have that hunger, because you got to work, and if you don't, you can't win a leadership.
Yeah, Mel, it is going to be the question that lingers throughout the holidays. You know, as the Prime Minister does his reflection, presuming so we don't get surprised, on Christmas Day, which is his birthday. If you had to pick someone to come out of it, who could make the most phone calls, do the organization, and win a leadership race, who do you think it would be?
It's a great question. I don't know. I don't know. The hunger piece, I don't know. Out of the folks that we've mentioned, I think the problem is a lot of the names that we've mentioned have been in cabinet for a long time. So there's some tired there. There's some alliance, some allegiance to Justin Trudeau there. So how do you make yourself a little bit different? The other name that we didn't mention that I think I've heard a lot about is Christy Clark, and I see her like she's campaigning as if there's no prime minister.
She's done it before too. She's won a leadership race before,
and she's capital P political. You know what I mean? Like that sort of a hunger thing. So
spent a lot of time in France apparently this summer learning French. So good for her.
It's interesting. Okay, we got to leave it there. We're out of time. We're going to talk more. Greg, we'll get back to you in 2025 for sure. We were actually. You're good. All right.
I'm good.
Look, I want to thank you for being here every Friday, every big breaking political day, and being. Disagreeing without being disagreeable. There goes my pen. Greg McEachran, Melanie Richer, Fred Delory. You watch them every Friday right here on Power and Politics. I'm David Cochrane. Thank you for watching the special holiday edition of P&P. More CBC News to follow right here on CBC News Network.
What up, chickens? Car's gonna be gigantic. Time is it? It's midnight? Damn. I should probably put my character to sleep. Okay, so that doesn't get smelted, I guess. Interesting.
It's a special holiday edition of Power and Politics.
One more.
I'm David Cochran. We are counting down the top 5 Canadian political stories of the year. Which headlines
love me
Canadians
some,
talking the most or drove the news agenda? We've got a special power panel here to look back at what's dominated the year's news cycle. Here with me in Ottawa is Vandana Cotter. She's a former advisor to Prime Minister Justin Trudeau. Kate Harrison is a conservative political analyst. Matthew Dubé is a former NDP MP. And Rob Benzie is the Queen's Park Bureau Chief for the Toronto Star. Good to see you all. Happy holidays. Let's get started. Ranking at number 5 amongst our top stories for 2024.
Canada has provided credible, irrefutable evidence.
Did he finish the path?
ties
Oh my God,
between
he did.
Agents of the government of India
Mad
and a
bastard.
murder of a Canadian citizen on Canadian soil.
It is
Is
absolutely
there a
unacceptable.
horse still over there?
Homicides, plural. Extortions, plural. Acts of violence against Canadians,
No.
acts of intimidation.
It is obvious that the government of India made a fundamental error in thinking that they could engage in supporting criminal activity against Canadians here on Canadian soil.
Indian government interference in Canadian politics is number 5 in our top political stories, with allegations of murder and those tit-for-tat diplomatic expulsions making headlines this year. Kate, when you're in government and you expect to deal with many things, it is not extrajudicial assassinations and transnational repression, but that is what the government of Canada has had to deal with here.
Yeah, indeed. And, you know, there's a significant Indian diaspora community in Canada, so there's obviously a domestic political consideration here, not just the actions, the alleged actions of the Indian government. You know, considering the government and the Liberals right now really need to make a domestic political case for their survivability, this had the potential to serve as a bit of a distraction. I think you can say that the Prime Minister acted conclusively on this matter. I do think there's going to be a long tail. We see parliamentary committees continuing to study Indian interference, foreign interference more broadly. We're still waiting for another update on Justice Hogue's report, which is more about electoral interference broadly. I do not think this story ends in 2024, and it's something that the government and other political parties are going to have to be contending with heading into 25.
It definitely won't end in 24, Matthew. May not end in 25, right? I mean, there's indictments and arrests in the United States, here in Canada, the continuing diplomatic challenges. What are your thoughts on number 5 here?
Well, it's quite egregious, obviously, and I agree with everything Kate said. And I would add the possibility, I mean, we'll have a new president sworn in the United States. The Americans are obviously a key player here because there was allegations of situations happening across the border as well that impacted Canada and Canadians. And then obviously there's the very real possibility of a change in the federal government here in Canada as well. So how does that impact that relationship? It'll be quite something to watch. India is a huge country. It's a major economic player, and as Kate also mentioned,
10 more what,
there's a huge
Fargo?
diaspora community here. And we've seen tensions flare as well as part of this, and how that gets navigated by political leaders whose voices and words matter in that instance, and how those communities interact with each other, and how it impacts public safety, for example, is something that'll be really important to watch over 2025.
Vandana, it's remarkable that when foreign interference burst onto sort of the political agenda in a massive way, it was all about China. Nominations, in the back corridors of elections through subtle interference, and now India is front and center with violence and allegations of murder.
Yeah, I think that'd be a surprise to the mainstream. I think a lot of us who follow Indian politics, and a lot of the diaspora community themselves would say that this has been coming. I've been dealing with some issues about this since I was in the Prime Minister's office. Requests from agents saying they can't have a Punjab pavilion at a Caribram event, for example. So this has been on the upside. I think it is, to whatever everyone's point here, is that it's going to shift how we deal with India. Right. India is, again, to what Kate and Matthew said, huge diaspora here.
Well, it's just you, Fargo.
As well as a huge economic
So I'm going to get a drink, and then we'll do maybe one
India from a business side of things.
mine
so
run.
One thing I've actually read from a piece from Ben Roth said
Or I might
in
even
Foreign
go to
Affairs
bed
that
before
sometimes
that.
we just shift
We'll
how
go
we
to
think
bed
about
when
these
this is
countries
done.
that may have been allies in the past. So Mr. Modi has been clear that he has very clear views on what extremism is to India, what is a threat to India, and he has not shifted on that. I have been dealing with this government when I was in Prime Minister's office, and they won't shift on these things, right?
No.
They have. So we now have to evaluate how we engage with them. So I don't think this ends in 2025. I think it's something that you'll see as long as Prime Minister Modi is in government.
Well, and Benzi, that's the challenge, right? Because sort of the Western nations were all counting on Modi to be this counterweight to China, and he may still be that because of the moral scales of geopolitics and how those things work. But domestically, agents of the Indian government being linked to these crimes is an untenable situation for Canada.
No, it's not tenable, David, and Vandana and Matthew and Kate are bang on. There are 1 in 25 Canadians is of Indian descent. 1 in 50 Canadians is of Sikh descent. So you have this really complicated political dynamic here at home. But to put it in context, can you imagine, David, if there were quote unquote Quebec separatists living in New Delhi and the RCMP was assassinating them because they were seen as a threat to Canada back home because we were concerned about Quebec secession? Well, this is sort of what India is alleged to have done. They're concerned about Khalistani separatists, and they're assassinating them on Canadian soil. And this is a really shocking crime, and I think. And Vandana's right. It's not shocking to people in the diaspora community. I mean, near where I live, I'm in Toronto, but in Brampton, that is the tensions are visible on the streets of that city, one of the biggest cities in Ontario, between different diaspora communities against this backdrop. It's a very, very shaky situation, a very troubling situation.
Yeah, I feel like this is going to be on countdown list in 2025 as well. Okay, that's our number 5 pick for top stories of the year. Which story ranks number 4 out of our top 5 political stories? Stick around and find out. That one's next. Welcome back to the special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today, we're taking you through the top 5 political news stories in Canada this year. So far, we have at number 5, Indian foreign interference. Now, for number 4.
Canadians have economic whiplash. It has been a really hard time.
High inflation and interest rates have been a heavy burden.
We are making life cost less.
Conservatives will vote against this wasteful, inflationary budget.
We know that middle-class families need a break.
Carbon tax is the worst tax.
It's a weight that Canadians can't bear.
They can lower the cost of food, of gas, of home heating by canceling the increase.
This policy is wrong.
We have to be sure that housing supply keeps up.
And now we're going to be able to give a tax break for all Canadians.
A 2-month temporary tax trick.
The runway's in sight, but we still need to land this.
The cost of living crisis is our number 4 political story of 2024. It dominated the political discourse this year and drove the political agenda. The Power Panel is back with Rob Benzie, Matthew Dubé, Vandana Cotter, and Kate Harrison. Vandana, it's an interesting issue because it's kind of been a good news, bad news story on that, and that inflation is down, interest rates are coming down, but cost is still high because of the price increases are baked in, and it's sideswiping governments everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird situations where all macroeconomic indicators show that the economy's better, but people just aren't feeling it, right? I hear it from moms groups, I hear it from friends of mine who it's mainly at the grocery store, just feeling that, it's really hard to keep up. And, I think governments, and I'm seeing this, around the world, it's been a global issue, that current governments are having issues tackling that they're saying the things, but people aren't feeling what they're feeling. They feel like it's not authentic. They feel like, what are you doing for me? Like if grapes are $10 today, to some people that's fine, but to some moms, that's a big shift for them and a huge issue to their bank account, And I think the current government has done things like the GST vacation, hoping for something small to help people during the holidays. I've seen people sharing, what's on as soon as the weekend happen, like here's what's happening, like buy your books, buy your things for your kids, etc. But the question is, how do you keep it for longevity, right? How do we make Canadians feel that they feel supported and that there can be an end to this thing?
Matthew, the Liberals were kind of slow to respond to this. The Conservatives were quick to jump on it, and it's derailed like signature policy items like carbon pricing for the government and created problems for provincial governments too.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of, passing the buck back and forth between the federal government and the provinces. I think this is a big story for 2024 namely because it's the thing that eclipses all other issues for the majority of the Canadian electorate, I think. Everyone's talking about who's going to handle Donald Trump and how and big stories like that, but I think at the end of the day, this remains the dominant issue. I mean, it so often is going into an election, but particularly at this time. I also think, speaking from my corner of the house, if you will, the other reason it had an impact is I think it's one of the motivators from NDP leader Jagmeet Singh and his caucus to want to tear up the supply and confidence agreement with the government because of, as you mentioned, that slowness to get in front of this issue was starting to weigh them down. What traditionally should be a strong issue for New Democrats, we'll obviously see in 2025 if that helps them recover in any way in the polls. But I think wanting to stand apart on this issue was part of what motivated that decision.
Right. And Benzie, it was a big issue in the U.S. election too, right? Like, no carbon pricing, not Tiff Macklem, but, a cost of living and affordability because of all the global factors driving up food prices and things down there. Inflation is a government killer, and that's proving to be the case again and again and again.
Yeah, and David, not just in the United States, we saw in the United Kingdom, Rishi Sunak's Conservatives were wiped out by Keir Starmer's Labour Party, and look, I mean, there are lots of factors that went into Trump winning, but cost of living, I think, was top of mind for folks. If a box of Cheerios costs so much more in Michigan than it did 4 years ago, you notice that. And Vandana is bang on. It's the grocery store where you really, really feel it because we all go to the Metro or the Loblaws or whatever, and you're at the cash register and you have a mental tally in your head of what it's going to be, and then you're like, wow, $95, I can carry this in one bag. So. It's happened to me the other day, actually. Yeah. So it is kind of, it is a jarring thing, and it's a government killer, and it doesn't matter whether it's the United States, the United Kingdom, or potentially here in Canada in 2025.
Yeah, Kate, I can get $95 in one bag because they sell wine in grocery stores now, and that is tax free for a limited time only.
But
for 2 months.
Yeah, it's easing off, right? And that's a good thing in terms of inflation, but that's the consequence of monetary policy. But on the other side of that, unemployment is going up, growth is going down. The calibration of an economy is a difficult task.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about it particularly in terms of the impact on youth, because youth unemployment has been persistently high. You see the bigger number, in the most recent reporting. But youth are really, really struggling with the cost of living. I think it's difficult to separate housing from this conversation as well, availability, affordability of it. Yeah. And I believe about 70% of the population identify either the cost of living or the housing issue as their top issues. A lot of the challenge here is, I think, Prime Minister Trudeau has lost credibility in communicating effectively on economic matters. The polling I've seen suggests the Conservatives own that territory, and the NDP actually outperform the Liberals when it comes to messaging around the economy. It's very difficult to get that back. I don't think the holiday will do that. Perhaps for some it addresses some short-term pain, but there's a bigger credibility issue here, I think, for the Prime Minister in terms of being able to regain that economic narrative. Perhaps a new finance minister provides an opportunity to turn the page. I am a bit skeptical.
It's the challenge on that, though, Kate. Like, even Donald Trump, who ran on this, said afterwards, it's going to be tough to bring down the price of groceries, right? Because as powerful as governments can be, there's so many factors that go into it that it's tough to solve.
Yeah, there's no silver bullet.
Yeah.
I think it can be helped by painting a clear picture about what you're doing to control spending. The government is not doing that with a $21 billion additional deficit on top of the 40 that was announced in the fall economic statement. I also think that this issue has become harmonious with the carbon tax. Now we can debate how real or not the impact is on people's day-to-day affordability and cost of living, and particularly grocery prices. But where the Conservatives have had success this year, in my view, is marrying those issues together. The impact of the carbon tax on the cost of living, that is not going to be helped by a planned increase in April.
Yeah, and Vandana, that is a challenge on this, right? Because, Trevor Toome and others have done studies. Carbon tax doesn't really affect things as much as people would argue politically, because there is the rebate, and the inputs into basic food prices has more to do with distance and climate change and supply chains and the war in Ukraine and these things. But that's a real long explanation that requires footnotes and charts that people just see their bill and they get mad.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things where people are like, yeah, I hear all that. How are you going to help me, though? People can understand the war, people can understand all that, and you can hear the carbon tax is not inflationary, but now it's like the question is it baked into Canadian psyche, right? Yeah. And then that's the problem. Yeah. It's hard to take out those levers at that point. But I think it comes from, when you govern, one of the issues I found when I was there is that you have all these issues coming at you over and over again. So you have COVID, we had, at that same year we had Wet'suwet'en, we had COVID, we had COVID too, and we thought COVID was not that bad, but now it's actually really bad. Exactly. That too, I remember. And then it's hard, you're focused on these things and all these other things are coming through and percolating that it's hard to governments to pick up on because you're driving a big ship and it's hard to move quickly. So what happens, I think, yes, a new finance minister could help turn the page, something fresh, but some new ideas and also just authentic speaking and saying, and Kate brings up a good point to youth. I have a lot of friends who are younger than me who say, I don't actually plan to buy a house, there's no point. Yeah. And that hopelessness. So how do you counter that? And I think they really have to think through how do we show that and what is the vision for the future?
Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. And even if you can give a credible technical explanation why you're not the cause of the problem, they want you to come with a solution. And if you can't do that, that's where it's going to be trouble.
What have you done for me lately?
Okay, that's number 5 and number 4. Which story ranks number 3 amongst our top 5 political stories of the year? Stick around and find out. That's next. Welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today we're taking you through the top 5 political news stories of 2024. So far, we have at number 5, Indian foreign interference. At number 4, the cost of living. Now, let's get to number 3.
The next Prime Minister of Canada, Pierre Poilievre.
Life wasn't like this before Justin Trudeau, and it won't be like this after he's gone. And let me say how incredibly proud and even a little bit shocked I was that in the Liberal fortress of St. Paul's, the people voted for our common sense plan to axe the tax, build the homes, fix the budget, and stop the crime.
What's been really interesting about the Conservative support growth is that it's coming from a wide range of parties.
They can't just throw him out. He can't just run away. They need to face the music. Why won't we have a carbon tax election now?
Your home, my home, our home. Let's bring it home.
Coming in at number 3, the Federal Conservative Surge. It's a party that was riding high this year with consistently stellar polling numbers and huge by-election victories. The Power Panel is back with Kate Harrison, Matthew Dubé, Vandana Cotter, and Rob Benzie. Kate, winning Toronto St. Paul, winning Langley, which we expected them to win, but by 50 percentage points and a persistent 20-plus lead in the polls. I mean, a pretty good year for an opposition party when they normally don't have them.
Yeah, and sustainability and longevity is very hard in this current dynamic. And these poll numbers are sticky. They've been, consistently at least 15 or 16 points ahead. Some of the latest polling suggests that could be as high as 25 points ahead. So there is huge credit that should be given to the Conservatives for being able to maintain that volume of support. I don't know if it is so much a surge as opposed to the word you use, consistent, right?
Yeah.
This has been incremental growth. I think part of that is obviously fueled by dissatisfaction with the current government. But I also think that there's something broader to observe just around a realignment around policy and what Canadians want to see in terms of solutions for the various issues that we face. I think you see globally the election of more right-leaning governments and politicians. And I think that in many ways the pendulum is swinging back a bit more to the center or to the right in terms of what types of policies people want to see their governments implement. So I think that Conservatives have done a good job communicating both on the substance of issues, and we spoke about the cost of living. I think that they have really seized that, but also in taking advantage of a disorganized and chaotic government.
Yeah, I mean, Benzie, there is the weakness and the difficulties that the Liberals are facing. The Liberals and the NDP will criticize the Conservatives for not having solutions, merely having slogans. Whatever that it means, it is not resonating with voters. It's been Pierre Poilievre and his team at #1 all year.
Yeah, no, Kate's right, and it actually, David, you can chart their surge in the polls to rising interest rates. When the Bank of Canada started raising interest rates,
After the pause, then
Trudeau's Liberals, their numbers just started to plunge. Now, look, Bank of Canada has been lowering interest rates for the last few months, and it hasn't helped the governing Liberal Party. So I think Kate's right; it's baked in now. I covered the St. Paul's by-election. Noteworthy, David, that the only journalists at Don Stewart's headquarters that night were from the Toronto Star, the CBC, and Radio Canada. So not all of Mr. Poilievre's favorite outlets. Actually, Mr. Poilievre wasn't even there himself. But I talked to his folks that night. They were bullish, but they didn't think they were going to win. And remember, it wasn't until the pre-dawn hours that they finally they eked it out over Leslie Church, the Liberal candidate, in a riding that is a Liberal stronghold and should be a Liberal stronghold. And it's the kind of riding, you lose those ridings, you lose in Montreal, David Lamette's old seat. They are in big trouble, and I think they know that.
Yeah.
But are the Tories popular or are the Liberals unpopular? It's probably a little bit of both.
Yeah, I remember it was the public broadcasters and the Star there, because we got those personal invitations from the Conservatives to come to their headquarters. Matthew, your thoughts on this? I mean, the Liberals have been struggling. The NDP have not benefited from it. It's been the Bloc to some degree in Quebec, but the Conservatives in all of Canada.
Yeah, and I think the Bloc benefits from some of these vote splits. Like a lot of folks on the ground in the by-election in Montreal will tell you that the Conservatives grew very incrementally. They were a non-factor, but they were a factor in the end because everything they hived off from the Liberals allowed, the Bloc to sort of squeak through there, and it was a three-way race, say that 10 times fast, between the NDP, the Liberals, and the Bloc. So it'll be interesting come the next election how that dynamic plays out in places where, you think of like downtown Toronto or Montreal, for example. Does that play out a little bit differently where the Conservatives are strong enough to eat support from the Liberals, but not necessarily in traditional spaces? It'll be interesting to see, but
it's a huge
ultimately it's a trend against incumbency, right? I think a lot of what Kate said is true. The one point where I would disagree is, you see a Susan Holt defeating Blaine Higgs in New Brunswick. You see Scott Moe's support lowering, even though, he doesn't seem to be going anywhere, notwithstanding. In France, the center got blown up, but the left also did as well as the right. And then obviously the UK example where we see Labour having defeated a Conservative government there. What'll be interesting to watch is, if everything plays out the way the polls seem to indicate, is how long does that trend sustain itself afterwards? What's the honeymoon look like, right, if there's a hypothetical Conservative government?
Yeah, I think of some of those provincial issues, it was more a loss of focus on the main thing. Like Blaine Higgs was focused on everything except affordability and housing. Scott Moe got distracted by gender policy, so the cities rejected him. And the UK Conservatives, I mean, what can you say about them? But, Vandana, the Canadian Conservatives, to continue my point, they have focused relentlessly, on the four things, right? The Access Tax, build the home, stop the crime, fix the budget, and they add in other things for there. But that has been the secret sauce.
Yeah, I mean, message discipline is so important, and any party that wants to take these on, you need to keep that. One thing that we've said, when we were in opposition, is the reason we say middle class all the time is because people have to hear it 100 times before they hear it the first time, right? I think to kind of Kate and Matthew's point, is that I do think it's more change rather than right policies. But I also think about when people think, what is not working for me? Okay, maybe a change will work for me. I think from the by-elections, we can't ignore the fact that the war in Gaza did have a profound impact as well, and the rise of anti-Semitism as well as anti-Palestinian racism, and people again feeling a little bit helpless, wanting to have more response from the government, and the government doesn't always have the levers to respond the way that people want to. But it has been something that has been dogging the government, obviously, because as you govern, other issues are coming up. They're trying to catch up now, but again, message discipline and trying to re-engage with the public and say, I know this is important for you, and trying to pull that back from Pierre Poilievre, because I don't think this is more of a Pierre Poilievre love-in, but it's just a desire for change.
Yeah,
go ahead.
No, he read the mood, turned it into policy, and turned it into messaging, and that's what's mattered. Just quickly.
Yeah, there are just two points I would make on that. On two issues, the Conservatives, I think, have managed to change public opinion and the narrative on these. The carbon tax is one, and you saw Liberal premiers start backing away from it, and I think that is in no small part because of Pierre Poilievre and because Canadians have grown tired of that policy. The second one is safe supply. You have really seen the public discourse around safe supply and injection sites change, and I think that is a result of Conservative advocacy.
It's interesting, though, the death rate in Alberta and in Saskatchewan.
Celsius or Jesus? Where are you?
On that, right? So you get into the nitty gritty of it. You know, that's a tough policy. I agree with the changing of the mood.
Yes, and there's a public safety impact, I think, that people see.
The disorder
as very
thing,
real.
for sure.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, quick last 30 seconds.
I was just going to say that on that, I think people still want action on climate change, right? Maybe the carbon tax seems unpopular, they're not sure, they don't see the actual, like, how does it affect today or climate, you know, extreme weather events today. So I think people still want those things. And on safe supply, I think it's complex. I think people just get irritated seeing what's happening on the streets, but they know that it's a core issue that is still going to exist. So we need more mental health facilities. We need more of a diversified way of affecting those. But again, these are not issues that are main for the public, but people have to address them.
Okay, there's a lot to talk about there. We've got to move on to our next pick, because our number 2 story in our top 5 political news stories of 2024.
I want to thank the American people for the extraordinary honor of being elected your 47th president.
This is a relationship that we know takes a certain amount of working on, and that's what we'll do.
If we don't pay and we're attacked by Russia, will you protect us? I said, no, I would not protect you. In fact, I would encourage them to do whatever the hell they want. You got to pay.
I think we need to make sure that we are prepared and that we continue to keep our alliances strong.
We can't have open borders. And I said to the president of Mexico and to Justin Trudeau, if it doesn't stop, I'm going to put tariffs on your country.
It's like a family member stabbing you right in the heart.
We need a plan to put Canada first.
Hundreds and thousands of Canadian jobs are at risk.
This is a moment when Canada needs to be united.
We have a great relationship. I have so many friends in Canada, but we shouldn't have to subsidize a country.
At number 2, we have Donald Trump's return to the White House, a U.S. story, but a story that will make headlines in Canada over the next 4 years. And Matthew, it has already reoriented federal politics, provincial politics, the focus of the economy, the border, immigration, everything. The disruptor in chief is on his way back to the White House.
Yeah, ever since Trump has been elected, it feels like I get a notification on my phone from a Canadian news source telling me about something ridiculous that he said about the Prime Minister, about the country.
The governor, you mean, of the 51st state of Canada.
Of course, I've got to get my facts straight there. It's definitely upended the apple cart, and I think it's something that generates attention. And I think it feels a bit different than last time in 2016, where there seems to be a bit more panic amongst the political Canadian class, and I think that that's true federally, provincially, and across parties. It might be manifesting differently, but I think there's a little more uncertainty this time about how it's going to go. I mean, I think last time there was challenges for sure. I think for all intents and purposes, it went relatively smoothly, but there was definitely some hiccups at the beginning. You can't discount these threats, and I mean, even from, I think Trump's base in the U.S. has hardened quite a bit. I think he's hardened quite a bit, and I mean, in theory, unless something happens in the next 4 years,
Does Fame
this will
just
be
go
his
on
last,
forever?
you know,
Holy
run in
shit.
the White House, right? So,
in theory, yes.
In theory, I recognize. But I mean, look, so there's, in some ways, you're almost emboldened in that respect, right? Like the norms that have already gone out the window with this man have even more so this time. So it'll be interesting to see how folks react, but it's undoubtedly been impactful. That being said, I think we can't overstate, you know, how important the domestic issues remain in the minds of the Canadian electorate.
Oh yeah, I mean, but Kate, he is going to, you know, if the tariffs go up, I mean, the ability to respond to domestic challenges is going to be eliminated, right? And there's this panic, as Matthew said, because the federal government's in a much weaker position, but also we have seen Trump in action and MAGA in action from January 6th, and the moderates are gone now, so who knows where he goes.
Yeah, the big thing that I think has changed and shifted is the goodwill Canadians have for our current government. That is something they benefited from in 2016, and there was a lot of trust in the government's ability to manage that relationship. Now it's clear that Canadians, for them, that trust has deteriorated. Really difficult to predict.
Just goes on
where this is
forever.
going
Holy
to go.
shit.
I do not think that all of these problems are solved by a change in government, because Trump has a domestic political audience to contend with, and populists to make happy there. And I don't think that it will be a simple matter of changing leaders. What I do think is that trying to run against Trump, as the Trudeau government has really since the beginning of this year, until November 5th, when it became clear that that was not going to be a smart decision, has not helped. And so putting in the same players for a different game is not a winning solution.
But you know, Vandana, Kate's right on something there, that, you know, the push for the election to deal with Trump, I understand the political motivation of that, but if it is Prime Minister Poilievre, the belief of a $100 billion subsidy because of trade
Well, this is going to be
doesn't go away.
super handy for later.
Because of those things doesn't go
my
away.
tower is going to be gigantic.
The challenge is in the White House, no matter who's.
Maybe make a floor for
Trump
each of my
needs
D&D
vocals.
parties.
His audience. I don't think he cares who's in charge. I
They've
think he'll,
bitten off
whether
more
it's
than I
Mr.
could
Poilievre
chew,
as
but
Prime Minister or Mr. Trudeau, he'll still troll all of us. Like that's what he's going to do. He likes to cause disruption. He likes to get a reaction. That's how he is. I think the best way forward is really. You know, continue, I think, with Mr. LeBlanc there. I think he's one of the best people to manage those politics and engage with those people on the Trump administration side, and still work through diplomacy, you know, and trying to make the case that this is not going to benefit your economy. And we will take actions to that. So that's the best way forward. I think the change in government, again, I think just causes more disruption, but it's an easy political tool to pull at.
But you know, Rob, it's been interesting how it's affected the guy you cover all the time, because I don't remember the cabinet shuffle, but Premier Doug Ford is also now the Minister of International Trade and Foreign Affairs somehow, and chief spokesperson for Canada on U.S. cable networks.
Yes, he's everywhere on CNN, Fox, CNBC. But of course,
I think I'm
remember,
getting to the end of it.
Dominic LeBlanc, Dominic LeBlanc and Doug Ford are tight. Now, Doug Ford's favorite person in Justin Trudeau's cabinet was Chrystia Freeland. Ford was not happy when Freeland left and how she left. He was very unhappy about that. But he is tight with Mr. LeBlanc as well, and I think the two of them will be able to sing from the same sort of song sheet because they have the same interests after all. Ontario depends on U.S. trade more than any other province, $500 billion a year between this province and the United States alone. And if there are
automotive
25%
sector, baby,
on January 20th or 21st, this province will hurt more than any other province. But I think the one thing, David, first of all, I think two things. Donald Trump is 78 years old. He's not going to run again. The Constitution doesn't allow him to run for a third term, so he will not run in 2029 or whatever, or 2028. But I also think he's in a little bit of a lame duck situation, because he's going to put these tariffs. Let's say he does put the tariffs on. Canada retaliates. That's going to cause prices to rise in the United States for gasoline, for other kinds of goods. And then what happens? The midterm elections in 2026 in the United States, the Republicans get hammered. I mean, it's all cyclical. People are catastrophizing Trump so much right now, saying, "Oh my God, it's the end of the world. He's got both houses. He's got the Supreme Court. He is almighty and omnipotent." Well, he didn't even get 50% of the vote. He actually got fewer votes than he did in 2020 when he lost to Joe Biden. So I think we have to put it in context. It's going to be bad. It's going to be rough. And Kate is right that it's not going to all change if we have a change in government here in Canada. But it is not the end of the world.
Yeah, you say all of those things, Rob, and yet the country is spinning itself into a panic, and he's not even in office yet. You know, this is
ridiculous.
This is
ridiculous.
Yeah, this is where it is. You know, people want to spend billions of dollars on things to make you happy, and I feel like the response to this and the federal election, I'm going to look ahead to next year. Those are going to be number 2 and number 1 in some order, I think. Okay, we're going to take a break there, and we're going to tell you which story tops them all as the number 1 Canadian political story of 2024. Stick around and find out. That's next. Welcome back to this special holiday edition of Power and Politics. Today we're taking you through the top 5 political news stories of 2024. So far, we have at number 5, Indian foreign interference. At number 4, the cost of living. At number 3, the federal conservative surge. And at number 2, Donald Trump's return. Now for our top Canadian political story of the year.
Every leader, every party has a best before date. Our best before date is here.
I don't really pay attention to the polls.
It seems as though the electorate has tuned out.
Watching the Conservatives win in St. Paul means that, like, everything we're working on could be thrown in a trash bin.
If I listen to my constituents, yes, I have to say that we would have to change leadership.
Obviously, it's not what we expected as the outcome.
It's a tough loss for us.
Okay, Trudeau isn't perfect, but he's way better than Poilievre.
People have had enough. They've tuned him out, and they want him to go.
His caucus is revolting.
Have you seen the letter? I haven't seen the letter. What's this supposed letter?
Oh, I still have multiple more pickaxes. Hell yeah.
Conversations about what is the best way to take on Pierre Poilievre in the next election. But that'll happen with me as leader.
Chrystia Freeland this morning has decided to leave cabinet.
Mr. Trudeau's government is over.
Canadians are tuning him out.
The next steps are that he should resign.
Well, Justin Trudeau's political troubles, the top political story of this year. His finance minister resigned publicly on the day of the fall economic statement. The prime minister is facing call after call from within his own caucus to step aside as leader. He's lost multiple key by-elections and saw his governance agreement with the NDP crumble. The Power Panel is back on this. Kate Harrison, Matthew Dubé, Vandana Cotter, and Rob Benzie. Vandana, other than that, it's been a pretty good year.
Yeah, other than that, how's the play, Miss Lincoln?
Well,
what do you think?
Oh, that's it. Okay. Listen, it's been a tough year for the government.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of tough issues this government has faced. You know, Trump 1, Trump 2, COVID, a war in Ukraine, war in Gaza. So a lot of things that are also taking away from being able to focus on the day-to-day issues of Canadians. Not that they're not focused on it, but even keeping up with the political feeling on the ground has been tough. It's been a tough week with everything happening with the finance minister, but having been to both the Laurier Club as well as the Liberal Christmas Party, I will say it didn't feel like that, judging from his speech. He looked energized. He acknowledged that there were troubles happening, but he looked like he was full of rigor and ready to set out and focus on a better next year. I know people who have been in touch with him and talking about, you know, what can we do next? How can we move forward? How do we engage with Canadians? How do we get through this? So my guess is that despite the bad year, that you know they're looking to a year of hopeful optimism and trying to get their footing properly.
Yeah, look, and as we're recording this, the Prime Minister, we presume, is still in his period of reflection, right? And Rob, we may not know exactly what he's going to do.
Been reflecting for a while.
But you know what strikes me is you see the quotes coming from his own caucus, and these were the sort of things in the Martin Chrétien year were said to Ed Greenspan at the Globe and Mail anonymously. They're public, on camera, and almost daily now. It's an extraordinary time.
Yeah, I mean, it really does feel, notwithstanding the mood at the Christmas parties and so on, that he's a dead man walking. And I think, I mean, look, David, this time last year, I said that I thought that he would take a walk in the snow on February 29th, on the 40th anniversary of his father's walk in the snow in 1984, and then and leave with enough time for his party to rebuild. He has outstayed his welcome, and you've lost key by-elections in in Toronto, in Montreal, in Langley. They are. There aren't very many safe Liberal seats. You talk to Liberal MPs privately. Yes, lots of them are saying stuff on the record, but the stuff they're saying privately is even worse. They are very worried about their own electoral futures. And I think this is something that the Prime Minister needs to take into account. It's not like Chrystia Freeland was Paul Martin to his Jean Chrétien. She was never an insidious,
never a rival,
undermining him. No, never a rival. And remember, I covered her for her by-election in 2013 when she took a flyer on a young guy named Justin Trudeau, who was leading the third party, and a lot of people at that time thought Tom Mulcair of the NDP would be the one who would topple Stephen Harper's Conservatives, not Trudeau's third-party Liberals. And she took a flyer, won that by-election, and gave him a lot of credibility, and was nothing but a loyal soldier the whole time. And for him to do what he did to her a few days before the fall economic statement, telling her in a Zoom call, I'm going to replace you with Mark Carney, and then Carney doesn't take the job, it is so appallingly incompetent and laughable. I mean, I'm actually astounded that someone who is as skilled at politics as Mr. Trudeau was bungled this so badly. It's incredible.
Kate, it's interesting that there is this parade of ex-ministers who have left for various reasons during Trudeau's time as Prime Minister, who do not have kind things to say about him when they're out of politics. But you do have a lot of people still in the caucus right now who, like the Prime Minister, are personally loyal to the Prime Minister, but politically are just telling him to his face, it's over, man. You got to go, and here we are.
Yeah, and he's saying, la, la, la. Vandana spoke to the fact that there's all these issues that are happening, at home and abroad that are distracting the Liberal Party from managing their own affairs. Perversely, the reverse is true, where all of their internal affairs are leaving them unable or unwilling to act on the issues that people care about. And I think the big challenge, the parlor room politics of this, fun to discuss. But what are we communicating to Canadians about actually governing and taking care of the issues that they care about? What are we communicating to the incoming administration about the state of our affairs when this is the story, the disruption of the Liberal Party and the slow death of Justin Trudeau is what's occupying headlines? I think that is a recipe for a lot of Canadians just tuning out of politics, getting very cynical about government, more so than they already are, because, again, as fun as it is to discuss, there is a real seriousness here about whether or not this government is asleep at the switch at a time they need to be very much awake.
It's fun for you and the Conservative pundits who are on the show. I don't know about poor Vandana, but Matthew, what's the New Democrat perspective?
This is my last pickaxe.
Well, I think I won't sugarcoat it. I think there's some disappointment. I think that they haven't been able to carve out the support from the Liberals. It seems to have gone entirely one way. You'll see different polls where it's margin of error, it's tied, and certainly there's some silver lining there. And I mentioned earlier when we were talking about another story, maybe that'll play out in a positive way for the NDP in certain ridings in certain regions. But I also think they're challenged in some other places that people forget are traditional NDP territory out west and things like that, where Trudeau's unpopularity and maybe having let the agreement go on ever slightly too long has maybe dragged them down a little bit. Yeah. That being said, I do think that there's opportunity still, right? It's new year, new me, as people like to say, and I
will that be Jagmeet Singh's slogan when he comes back?
We'll see.
Or maybe it's Justin Trudeau's.
I'm certainly not pitching it, and I suspect some might be displeased that I even put it out there. No, but all kidding aside, I think it's been, I appreciate the external challenges and everything, but I do think the Prime Minister has been increasingly isolated, both in terms of the elected people around him.
You never want to hear that.
But also from
that the leader of your country is increasingly isolated. That never presages anything good.
Rob outlined how the situation with Mr. Freeland or former Mr. Freeland played out. That is demonstrative of not getting good advice. To think that there was no thought that you're going to put someone in a role with no department, basically being a symbolic person there, and ask them to still do their job while you were firing them over a Zoom call, everything just raises a bunch of red flags. And to think that no one took pause to say, we might want to consider that there might be other outcomes to this, like the one that we ended up seeing, I think is just, in a nutshell, what's been bogging down this Prime Minister, certainly over the last calendar year.
Vandana, I know you worked for the Prime Minister. You were in his office for considerable period of time and are friends with him. I'm not going to ask you if you think he should quit. I want to know what you think he will do, because I don't want to put you on the spot to say that. But what do you think he's going to do? He's heard all of this. He said, you know, when they presented him with the letter, I'm going to reflect on it. And 24 hours later, he said, I'm staying. This is different with Chrystia Freeland, right? Like, this is a letter with her name and her signature and her criticism spelled out in a more powerful way. What do you think he does?
I think he stays.
Yeah.
For all that I know of him, all that I know and having been in touch with him, I believe he stays. I think with Minister Freeland, I respect her decision. I understand why she did it. You know, this is unfortunately part of being in government. You serve at the pleasure. And I spoke at the Laureate Club event yesterday to a former minister who said, I didn't like being removed from cabinets. You serve at the pleasure. It's a risk you take. I've talked to other ministers like, I didn't like my portfolio change, but you just do that. And it's unfortunate, but that is part of how it works. Doesn't mean that you're guaranteed that spot forever. I do agree that if they given her, now that being said, I know there's a whole other story that I haven't heard it yet. When I hear it, you know, maybe I'll feel differently, but if that was what was presented to her, I understand, right? I think he stays. I think, and the caucus, you know, a lot of caucus members said to me, like, well, what do you want us to do? I still want to be an MP. I don't want to resign as independent. I still believe in liberal policies and Liberal Party. It's funny, my husband said, this is the biggest Christmas party I have been to. Like, you'd think it was a huge celebratory party, because the Liberal brand is still the Liberal brand, whether the Prime Minister is leading it of Justin Trudeau or not, or somebody else. So I think at the end of the day, people just, you know, are just going to let him do what he wants to do. The decision is with him, and his decision, for as far as I know, will be to stay. Okay, I got 30 seconds left. How does it get better for him? Because it feels like it's going to be more of this until an election that it looks like they will lose. People in.
Yeah.
Bring people in with a different perspective. Bring people in who've been on the outside and looking in to share it. Sometimes you just need to pivot. You need to have someone share you what maybe you're not seeing, maybe has some blinders on, and show to you what people need and give you some fresh new ideas of how to engage. The problem is when you are under attack, people become more insular. That's not the way. You need to bring in a whole new perspective, maybe perspectives that you don't want to hear, and have them lead you that way.
Okay. We just, in the quick time we have left, I just want to get your sense. Vandana says she thinks he stays. Benzie, stay or go? What do you think?
Vanda's right. Look, the only period of reflection Justin Trudeau ever seems to take is the reflection in the mirror. So I think he
Jesus,
does
man,
because he's so delusional and narcissistic about it. But if he takes some time over this holiday break and actually thinks about it and looks, if he really does care deeply about the Liberal Party, he would leave.
Okay, Rob Benzie playing the role of Wayne Long in that segment. Look, just kind of a prediction: a stay or leave. Kate, what do you think?
I think he sticks around. There's no other alternative that is obvious today.
Matthew, what do you think?
I think it's the wrong choice, but I do think he stays as well.
Okay, that's interesting.
Being able to polish story.
That's my impression as well. I have no hard information on it, but nobody leaves the Prime Minister's office willingly, right? The question then is, like, if he stays, does everybody else leave? And
tune in 4 hours for a completely
exactly. When we scrap this show after his press conference happens, we'll see. We'll find out soon enough. We'll be talking about it here on Power and Politics with you in some capacity in the new year. I want to thank the Power Panel, Vandana Cotter, Kate Harrison.
So much polished story.
I'm David Cochran. Thank you all for watching the special
I still have
edition
more.
of Power and Politics. More CBC News to follow right here on CBC News Network. Hope you're enjoying the holidays. We'll see you soon.
Yeah, I'm for sure gonna make some other tower made entirely of dorite. Hell yeah. So much dorite. Look at it all. All right. I think that's it. Is there anyone even streaming that we could raid? No, it's just you, Fargo. You can go watch whoever you want. It's almost embarrassing for me just to raid with one person. So, have a good night, Fargo. I'll see you tomorrow. Bye-bye now.